There were the roses in the rain. Don't cut them, I pleaded. They won't last, she said. But they're so beautiful where they are. Ah, we were all beautiful once, she said, and cut them and gave them to me in my hand.
At low tide like this, how sheer the water is. White, crumbling ribs of marl protrude and glare, and the boats are dry, the pilings dry as matches. Absorbing rather than being absorbed, the water in the bight doesn't wet anything. The color of the gas flame turned as low as possible. One can smell it turning to gas. If one were Baudelaire, one could probably hear it turning to marimba music. The little ochre dredge at work off the end of the dock already plays the dry, perfectly offbeat claves. The birds are outsized. Pelicans crash into this peculiar gas, unnecessarily hard, it seems to me, like pickaxes, rarely coming up with anything to show for it, and going off with humorous elbowings. Black and white man-of-war birds soar on impalpable drafts and open their tails like scissors on the curves, or tense them like wishbones till they tremble.
Whatever you are that weeps over the blistered riverbeds and the cracked skin of cities, you are not on our side. I, never seeking our eyes, shedding its griefs like stars over our hectic indifference, whispered monologue, subverting space with its tears, mourning the mournable, nailing the pale gray woolly flower back to its ledge.
You have only to wait. They will find you. The geese flying low over the marsh, glittering in black water. They find you. And the deer, how beautiful they are, as though their bodies did not impede them. Slowly they drift into the open through bronze panels of sunlight. Why would they stand so still if they were not waiting, almost motionless until their cages rust, the shrubs shiver in the wind, squat and leafless? You have only to let it happen, that cry, release, release, like the moon wrenched out of earth and rising full in its circle of arrows, until they come before you like dead things saddled with flesh, and you above them, wounded and dominant.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 92nd Street Y, to the David Geffen stage, for a very special night, a night 100 years in the making. The voices you just heard were William Carlos Williams, Elizabeth Bishop, Adrienne Rich, Seamus Heaney, and Louise Gluck, reading on this very stage. All of them were also included in this incredible new anthology, 100 Years of New Yorker Poetry, which we're here tonight to celebrate. We wanted to bring their voices back on stage to honor the history here at the 92nd Street Y and, of course, at the New Yorker. And to celebrate tonight this incredible anthology, since its very first issue, poetry has been foundational, integral, essential to the New Yorker, and one couldn't imagine the magazine without it. And over 13,500 poems have been published in the magazine throughout its history. And this anthology, selected and put together by Kevin Young, the poetry editor at the New Yorker, includes 538 poets and about 850 poems. And I think it's safe to say that if you want to understand poetry in the last 100 years, you should start with this book. And to celebrate this remarkable anthology and this legacy, we've assembled 9 amazing poets here tonight, all of whom have work in the book and are going to read some of their favorite poems from across the decades. Reading tonight from this anthology, we're pleased to welcome Kevin Young, the poetry editor of the magazine and the editor of this anthology. And in his spare hours, he's also head of the National Museum of African American History. He's an acclaimed poet, of course, in his own right as well. Next, we'll have Edward Hirsch, a MacArthur Fellow, and since 2003, he's been the president of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation. His new book, My Childhood in Pieces, comes out in June 2025. Next will be Diane Mehta, the author of 2 collections of poetry and a forthcoming book of essays, Happier Far. Her work has been recognized by fellowships at the Civitella Ranieri Foundation and Yaddo, and she was an editor at Public Space, PEN America, and Guernica. Next will be Mary Karr, a triple threat as an acclaimed memoirist and poet, not to mention as a professor of literature at Syracuse University. Her adored books include The Liars Club, Cherry, and Lit. After her will be Richie Hoffman, whose new book, The Bronze Arms, is forthcoming soon. His honors include the Ruth Lilly Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation and the Wallace Stegner Fellowship from Stanford University. And then a late addition, but we're very happy to have her, Eliza Griswold, who's the director of the journalism program at Princeton and received the Pulitzer Prize for her nonfiction work, Amity and Prosperity, and of course has contributed both poetry and reporting to The New Yorker for 20 years. And then Mary Jo Bang, professor of English at Washington University. She's the author of 9 books of poems, been nominated for a Lambda Award, a PEN Volcker Award, and the Heartland Booksellers Award, and received the National Book Critics Award. She's also published translations of Dante's Inferno. And then finally, Deb Garrison, who is the editor of this anthology at Knopf, and a wonderful poet in her own right and a former editor at The New Yorker as well. And then to end the night, Terrance Hayes, who's the author of 7 collections of poems, a recipient of the National Book Award and the Hurston Wright Award, and he is the Silver Professor of English at NYU. A couple notes for you all. First, books will be for sale in the lobby, so please, at the end of the show, please buy the book, and people will be around signing as well. And I want to highlight a few events that we have upcoming. I realize I didn't introduce myself. I'm Lucas Whitman. I'm the executive director of the Unterberg Poetry and Literature Center. And we have a couple other amazing events coming up for you. March 18th, we'll have the New Yorker's Lawrence Wright with his new thriller about the Middle East. March 24th, The Divorce Plot, a panel on marital decay with Weike Wang, Alyssa Bennett, Susan Minot. And March 27th, 250 years, take that, New Yorker, of Jane Austen with Helen Fielding, Kevin Kwan, Vivian Gornick, and Jennifer Egan celebrating all things Jane. So without further ado, please welcome Kevin Young to the stage.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Lucas, and thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight in the sleet and the snow. I think it gave a little drama to the evening in the production. We arranged it especially for you. I am Kevin Young, and I had the honor of editing this anthology. A little bit about that, I grew up with the 1969 edition. My copy had a yellow paperback, and this was in Kansas, where you bought books wherever you could, often at cigar stores, it turns out, which is where I think I got my copy, which I neatly underlined and read through and was just so struck by the news from this other world of both New York and the world of poetry. It was such a profound experience reading through those pages and coming to poetry in this way. It's a book that's organized, alphabetically by poem title, a very odd arrangement. There's bunches of oyster poems in a row, for instance. But there was something special about that, I think, that really was moving. So when David Remnick asked me about a year and a half ago, 2 years, whether I wanted to edit the anthology, I said only since I was 15 years old. So I thought I would really dive in and just read a few poems from the book and let you hear these great writers read. Thank you, David, for inviting me to do this wonderful book. The New Yorker published Langston Hughes a couple times, 3 times to be exact, in the magazine, which is wonderful, starting in 1939. And so this poem is from the early 40s by Langston Hughes. It's very short, and it's called Wake. Wake. Tell all my mourners to mourn in red, 'cause there ain't no sense in my being dead. That's Langston Hughes. Told you it was short, I warned you. One of the things that happened reading through most all of 13,500 poems, and I started that process without like a database. We were just like looking through, online and then in magazines. The deputy poetry editor, Hannah Eisenman, who deserves a shout out from the stage, we spent one day just with binders of old New Yorkers going through, and it turns out in the 40s and 50s especially, they would list the poems but not tell you what page number they were on. So that was fun. One of the other fun things that happened, and it was really a strange thing, is looking through the anthology that I so loved, I realized there weren't any black people in it. None in the 900 poems that were there. And in fact, the magazine published Langston Hughes and then had a large gap. I'm something like the 6th black poet in the New Yorker. And this is the poem I published in 1999, which fittingly is a poem called Langston Hughes. I want to also shout out Alice Quinn, who took this poem. I think Alice is here tonight. Please give her a round of applause if she's, give a wave, Alice. There she is. So wonderful that she took this poem, which I believe I faxed to the New Yorker. And after her, Paul Muldoon took a number of my poems. So this was a wonderful start to what became being an editor there. So this poem's called Langston Hughes, and it's a blues poem. Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes, Langston Hughes, oh come now and sang them weary blues. Been tired here, feeling low down, real tired here since you quit town. Our ears no longer trumpets, our mouths no more bells. Famous poet, busboy, do tell us of hell. Mr. Shakespeare in Harlem, Mr. Theme for English B, preach on, kind sir, of death, if it please. We got no more promise. We only got ain't. Let us in on how you came a saint. Langston, Langston, Langston Hughes, won't you send all heaven's news? Thanks again, Alice. So one of my favorite poems, period, but it turns out it was in the New Yorker, is Filling Station by Elizabeth Bishop. One of the things I love about Bishop's work is how clever, exact, and all that it is, but also its humanity, which she sees in this dirty filling station. I also admire the way that she had a really close relationship with the magazine, had a sort of right of first refusal. She would send work here to the magazine first. And what I love, if you read her letters to her editor, they're often like, the editor says things like, I'm away for 4 months. You cannot reach me. I will be in Europe traveling. Things that it's like when you leave for 5 minutes at the desk, you get a phone call and you're in trouble. But what's wonderful about that relationship is this long relationship she has with an editor. And I'm very fortunate to have worked with the editor, Deborah Garrison at Knopf, for 24 years. And she was the editor on this book, and it was really a boon when we sat down and had to talk over, well, we can't probably have 10 Sylvia Plath poems, much as I wanted to. So she was wonderful to work with, and she's a terrific editor, and she's backstage there, and I just want to give her a shout out, so please give her a round of applause too. So this is Filling Station by Elizabeth Bishop. Filling station. Oh, but it is dirty, this little filling station. Oil-soaked, oil permeated to a surprising overall black translucency. Be careful with that match. Father wears a dirty, oil-soaked monkey suit that cuts him under the arms, and several quick and saucy and greasy sons assist him. It's a family filling station, all quite thoroughly dirty. Do they live in the station? It has a cement porch behind the pumps, and on it a set of crushed and grease-impregnated wickerwork. On the wicker sofa, a dirty dog, quite comfy. Some comic books provide the only note of color, of certain color. They lie upon a big, dim doily, draping a tabouret, part of the set, beside a big hirsute begonia. Why the extraneous plant? Why, oh why, the table? Why, oh why, the doily? Embroidered in daisy stitch with marguerites, I think, and heavy with gray crochet. Somebody embroidered the doily. Somebody waters the plant, or oils it, maybe. Somebody arranges the rows of cans so that they softly say, eso, so, to high-strung automobiles. Somebody loves us all. One of the things that was great to hear from those past readings you heard from the 92nd Street Y, which were so wonderful to hear, it was a treat to hear Seamus Heaney, a poet I knew and got to study with, and he's in the anthology. But I thought I would read another poet I knew, not quite as well, but got to hear read this poem. And when I realized it had first appeared in the New Yorker, and it's a poem I turn to a lot, and a poem I've even reprinted before, it was something I just was eager to see in print here again. It's by Galway Cannell. It's a poem called Wait. And it's, I think, a poem about grief, but also about stay here and wait, as it says. Wait. Wait for now. Distrust everything if you have to. But trust the hours. Haven't they carried you everywhere up to now? Personal events will become interesting again. Hair will become interesting. Pain will become interesting. Buds that open out of season will become interesting. Second-hand gloves will become lovely again. Their memories are what give them the need for other hands. And the desolation of lovers is the same. That enormous emptiness carved out of such tiny beings as we are asks to be filled. The need for the new love is faithfulness to the old. Wait. Don't go too early. You're tired, but everyone's tired. But no one is tired enough. Only wait a little and listen. Music of hair, music of pain, music of looms weaving all our loves again. Be there to hear it. It will be the only time, most of all, to hear the flute of your own existence, rehearsed by the sorrows, play itself into total exhaustion. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Edward Hirsch. Thrilled to be in this anthology. I've been reading the New Yorker poems weekly for 50 years, but seeing it reading these poems in the anthologies, they're all in a different order. It's like seeing your life reordered in some kind of strange and compelling way. I'm going to read 3 poems, one by Gerald Stern, one by Philip Levine, and one of my own. Jerry and Phil were like older brothers to me. I met Jerry Stern in 1975 when I was 25 years old. He hired me for my first job in Pennsylvania Poets in the Schools. I went and stayed with him in Robsville when he was teaching at a community college. He seemed super cool to me because he had a 5th floor walk-up in New York on Van Dam Street. And 2 years later, I was so excited to see this poem in the New Yorker called 96 Van Dam. I'm going to carry my bed into New York City tonight, complete with dangling sheets and ripped blankets. I'm going to push it across 3 dark highways, or coast along around under 600,000 faint stars. I want to have it with me so I don't have to beg for too much shelter from my weak and exhausted friends. I want to be as close as possible to my pillow in case a dream or a fantasy should pass by. I want to fall asleep on my own fire escape and wake up dazed and hungry to the sound of garbage grinding in the street below and the smell of coffee cooking in the window above. I met Philip Levine in 1981. I was teaching at Wayne State University in Detroit, and my first job, and he took an interest in me because it was his alma mater. And when he came to Detroit to see his twin brother, Eddie, they invited me over for brunch. When Phil went to the bathroom, I said to Eddie, he seems kind of angry. And Eddie said, oh, you should have seen him in his heyday. We drove around. I showed him around. I mean, he showed me around, but I drove him all around the city. And over the years, I drove him around Detroit a lot. I also drove Eddie around a lot. And so I saw all the places where they grew up and where they worked in lousy jobs. And it gave me a kind of context for Phil's work and the excitement that I felt when I read this iconic poem, What Work Is, in the New Yorker in 1990. You know what work is. If you're old enough to read this, you know what work is, although you may not do it. Forget you. This is about waiting, shifting from one foot to another, feeling the light rain falling in the mist in your hair, blurring your vision, until you think you see your own brother ahead of you, maybe 10 places. You rub your glasses with your fingers, and of course, it's someone else's brother, narrower across the shoulders than yours, but with the same sad slouch, the grin that does not hide the stubbornness, the sad refusal to give in to rain, to the hours of wasted waiting, to the knowledge that somewhere ahead, a man is waiting who will say, no, we're not hiring today for any reason he wants. You love your brother. Now suddenly you can hardly stand the love flooding you for your brother, who's not beside you or behind or ahead, because he's home trying to sleep off a miserable night shift at Cadillac so he can get up before noon to study his German, works 8 hours a night so he can sing Wagner, the opera you hate most, the worst music ever written. How long has it been since you told him you loved him, held his wide shoulders, opened your eyes wide, and said those words, and maybe kissed his cheek? We've never done something so simple, so obvious, not because you're too young or too dumb, not because you're jealous or even mean or incapable of crying in the presence of another man. No, just because you don't know what work is. And this is my poem, Man on a Fire Escape. 1991, I was so excited to see it in the New Yorker. My wife did a cartoon, and on the bus, everyone had the New Yorker with my poem open. That's what it felt like. He couldn't remember what propelled him out of his bedroom window onto the fire escape of his fifth-floor walk-up on the river, so that he could see, as if for the first time, sunset settling down on the day's cityscape and tugboats pulling barges up the river. There were barred windows glaring at him from the other side of the street, while the sun deepened into a smoky flare that scalded the clouds gold vermilion. It was just an ordinary autumn twilight, the kind he had witnessed often before. But then the day brightened almost unnaturally into a rusting, burnished, purplish-red haze, and everything burst into flame. The factories pouring smoke into the sky, the trees and shrubs, the shadows of pedestrians scorched and running home. There were storefronts going blind and cars burning on the parkway and steel girders collapsing into the polluted waves. Even the latticed fretwork of stairs where he was standing, even the first stars climbing out of their sunlit graves were branded and lifted up, consumed by fire. It was like watching the start of Armageddon, like seeing his mother dipped in flames. And then he closed his eyes and it was over, just like that. When he opened them again, the world had reassembled beyond harm. So where had he crossed to? Nowhere. And what had he seen? Nothing. No foghorns called out to each other as if in a dream, and no moon rose over the dark river like a warning, icy, long forgotten, while he turned back to an empty room. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. The first poem I'm going to read is by Pamela Alexander, and it's called Howard Hughes Leaves Managua, Peacetime, 1972. The car is comfortable, but people swarm in the headlights, carrying kettles and babies. It's his birthday. Sometimes the road shakes. Buildings drop to rubble, and dust dulls the hood of the Mercedes. Which birthday? He tries to count. The dead lie by the road, looking surprised. He sings a phrase, forgets to sing, curls against cool leather. The car follows whichever roads aren't blocked with debris. This must be someone else's movie. He takes another Valium. Among the buildings, flames stand up, and then gray light connects them. He sees small fires fall into line, an airfield. When he leaves the car, heat and Spanish assault him, and smoke and people coughing. He knows the set, Hell's Angels, his crews running and stunt pilots carried away on covered stretchers. He walks slowly, but no one recognizes him. Which birthday, he will ask. Nothing is more elegant than the empty white jet touching down. It will bring him codeine and the sky, which is never busy. He will ask someone how old he is, and the answer will come quietly on a piece of paper. People die in movies. He will sleep and wake up in a different country. I chose all these poems because of their kind of mouthfeel. you can read and read and read, and then suddenly some poems just sort of fit in your mouth and they bumble out in the right way. So that's how I chose these two. This one is Mirror by Sylvia Plath. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. The eye of a little god, four-cornered. Most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is part of my heart. But it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. And then she turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. Great, right? Thank you. My last poem is mine. It's called Plum Cake. I'd make a plum cake when she died. A lamentation, grief bake, cottage through blood recipe, all of its colors shrieking at me, a sweet take on her love. I gaze at the street. Tree branches out front are tangled. My floor is slanted. My house cage is so small and dark for all the summits, slopes, and swamps of feeling. I am not to be purple plum decided in any still life of grief or reminiscence, no wafer-like religious feeling, never. She will never be human again. I knew I wouldn't make it. Italian plums are sweetest. I should find them in a market when days are longer. Fruit of aging, gift of goodness. A friend who lost a friend and made the cake said plum 6 times in one paragraph, so full of yearning are our phrases. Snow bright is her hair on the bed, knobby knuckle skin folded on her chest. She'd be delighted to celebrate her death. I love that, she'd say happily about the plum cake wake. Plums pooled around the cake slab in the photograph, bloody and marvelous. Skylight took her in. I couldn't make it. Thank you.
The New Yorker is 100 years old, and I'm feeling so spry. There are in this country little oddball, inward-facing literary humans whose sole contact with contemporary poetry is on the pages of The New Yorker in the library, and I was such a person. And I lived in Southeast Texas, and the only bookstore in the county, I think, sold Bibles the size of Buicks, but I remember reading this poem by Weldon Keys, who died the year I was born, but not before I could have inherited his spirit, so it's not one of those poems. But these Robinson poems, if you haven't read them, by Weldon Keys, Kees, are about a sort of Robinson Crusoe, which didn't strike me at the time, but they're just about, he writes about mystery. And this poem is just called Robinson. I think it was the first one. The dog stops barking after Robinson is gone. His act is over. The world is a gray world, not without violence. And he kicks under the grand piano, the nightmare chase well underway. The mirror from Mexico, stuck to the wall, reflects nothing at all, the glass black. Robinson alone provides the image Robinsonian, which is all of the room, walls, curtains, shelves, bed, the tinted photograph of Robinson's first wife, rugs, vases, panatellas in a humidor. They would fill the room if Robinson came in. The pages in the books are blank. The books that Robinson has read, that is his favorite chair, or where the chair would be if Robinson were here all day. The phone rings. It could be Robinson calling. It never rings when he's here. Outside, white buildings, yellow in the sun. Outside, the birds circle continuously, where trees are actual and take no holiday. Thank you. The great Lucille Clifton. I know, right? I'm writing a book about my late sister, which is a torment, as you know. Why do we do this for a living? I don't know. We're a sad lot, but we're determined, and we will not be thwarted. We will not be mocked, or we will be mocked, but we won't mind. Lucille Clifton, Here Rest, a poem for her sister, Here Rest. Here rest my sister Josephine, born July and 29 and dead these 15 years, who carried a book on every stroll. When Daddy was dying, she left the streets and moved back home to tend him. Her pimp came too, her diamond Dick, and they would take turns reading the Bible aloud all through the house. When you poem this, and you will, she would say, remember the book of Job. Happy birthday and hope to you, Josephine, one of the East's most wanted. May heaven, this is a wish for us all, may heaven be filled with literate men. May they bed you with respect. As thrilling as having a poem of your own wind up in the New Yorker, having your student's poem wind up in the New Yorker, you can't imagine. It's almost as good as a grandbaby. This is my friend Mossab Abu Toha, the great young poet from Gaza, and this poem is called Obit. To the shadow I had left alone before I crossed the border, my shadow that stayed lonely and hid in the dark of night, freezing where it was, never needing a visa. To my shadow that's waiting for my return, homeless except when I was walking by its side in the summer light. To my shadow that wishes to go to school with the children of morning, but couldn't fit through the classroom doors. To my shadow that has caught a cold now, that's been sneezing, coughing, and no one to say, God bless you. To my shadow that's been crushed by cars and vans, its chest pierced by shrapnel and bullets, flying with no wings. My shadow that no one's attending to, bleeding black blood through its memory, now and forever. I wish they had a shorter poem of mine in this anthology, but this is about people who have a little problem with drink. It's called, and I'd like to thank Alice Quinn and Kevin Young and the cultural jury duty they do. And even Howard Moss, who I used to believe there was a machine that would take my poem out of the envelope and put it in the return envelope before they had to read it. Hurt Hospital's best suicide jokes. Somebody's got to tell them. In unfolded aluminum chairs the color of shit and set in a circle, as if to corral some emptiness in this church basement deep in the dirt, strangers sit and tell stories. Sergei sipped wine in a hot tub. Janice threw back shots in a dive. Bob drew blinds to smoke blunts and ate nothing but cake frosting by the case. The first lady of someplace, I'm not making this up, the first lady of someplace swiped her son's meds to stay slim. Craig burst through bank doors, machine gun in hand. John geezed heroin, quote unquote, with a turkey baster, he says, into a neck vein. A cop shoved Mark's face in the mud, put a shoe on his neck to cuff him and ask where his friends were. I had friends, he said, think I'd be here. Zola once wrote that the road from the shrine at Lourdes was impressively littered with crutches, with crutches and canes, but he noted not one wooden leg. This is a true story I'm about to tell. It's a true story. In the garage with your face through a noose, you kick out the ladder, but the green rope won't give. And when your wife clicks the garage switch and the door tilts up, there you dangle on tiptoe, alive, all of us, on this island where we sip only black liquids or clear water and face down the void we've shaped. And should our eyes meet, what howls erupt like jackals we bawl to find ourselves upright. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richie Hoffman. Thank you. The best thing about having a poem in The New Yorker is that your poem gets to interrupt an article that someone is trying to read. The poem asserts itself, and the magazine, as this anthology does, affirms that poetry is a part of reality, an important part of reality that I need and that we need. This is a poem by my hero, James Merrill, an excerpt of a sonnet sequence of his, The Broken Home, that appeared in 1965. Crossing the street, I saw the parents and the child at their window, gleaming like fruit with evening's mild gold leaf. In a room on the floor below, sunless, cooler, a brimming saucer of wax, marbly and dim, I have lit what's left of my life. I have thrown out yesterday's milk and opened a book of maxims. The flame quickens. The word stirs. Tell me, tongue of fire, that you and I are as real, at least, as the people upstairs. I read this next poem in tribute to my teacher, Evan Boland, who died in 2020. And this poem was published in 2001, but it had a kind of viral afterlife during the COVID pandemic in the year she died. And it's maybe my favorite poem ever. Quarantine. In the worst hour of the worst season, of the worst year of a whole people, a man set out from the workhouse with his wife. He was walking, they were both walking north. She was sick with famine fever and could not keep up. He lifted her and put her on his back. He walked like that west and north, until at nightfall, under freezing stars, they arrived. In the morning, they were both found dead, of cold, of hunger, of the toxins of a whole history. But her feet were held against his breastbone. The last heat of his flesh was his last gift to her. Let no love poem ever come to this threshold. There is no place here for the inexact praise of the easy graces and sensuality of the body. There is only time for this merciless inventory. Their death together in the winter of 1847. Also what they suffered, how they lived, and what there is between a man and woman, and in which darkness it can best be proved. I'll end with a poem of mine, a love poem that I wrote in Evan Boland's class, and that takes place on a night like tonight. It's called French Novel. You were my second lover. You had dark eyes and hair like a painting of a man. We lay on our stomachs, reading books in your bed. I emailed my professor. I will be absent from French Novel due to sickness. You put on some piano music. Even though it was winter, we had to keep the window open day and night. The room was so hot, the air so dry, it made our noses bleed. With boots, we trekked through slush for a bottle of red wine we weren't allowed to buy, our shirts unbuttoned under our winter coats. The French language distinguishes between the second of two and the second of many. Of course, we'd have other lovers. Snow fell in our hair. You were my second lover, Another way of saying this. You were the other, not another. Thank you.
This is an incredible honor, and that was so much fun to listen to. And this book is a Bible, I'd say, not lightly. So to begin with a poem that I think many of us needed and remember in a moment of solace, that was published in 2001, and it's a poem by Adam Zagievsky. Tried to praise the mutilated world. Tried to praise the mutilated world. Remember June's long days and wild strawberries, drops of wine, the dew, the nettles that methodically overgrow the abandoned homesteads of exiles. You must praise the mutilated world. You watched the stylish yachts and ships. One of them had a long trip ahead of it, while salty oblivion awaited others. You've seen the refugees heading nowhere. You've heard the executioners sing joyfully. You should praise the mutilated world. Remember the moments when we were together in a white room and the curtain fluttered. Return in thought to the concert where music flared. You gathered acorns in the park in autumn, and leaves eddied over the earth's scars. Praise the mutilated world and the gray feather a thrush lost, and the gentle light that strays and vanishes and returns. Okay, I'm going to zing us to the other side of the world that was happening, as that was New York. I'm going to read a little poem of mine from Afghanistan, and to just say a fact I learned recently, that last year the Taliban banned women's rights to speak outside their home, including singing and reciting poetry. This is a poem called Occupation. The prostitutes in Kabul tap their feet beneath their faded burqas in the heat. For bread or 15 cents, they'll take a man to bed. Their husband's dead, their 7 kids unfed, and thanks to occupation, rents have risen 20-fold. Their chickens, pots, and carpets have been sold, and women's flesh now worth its weight in tin. 2 years ago, the Talibs favored boys and left the girls alone. A woman then was worth her weight in stone. I was going to read Louise Glick, but having heard her read herself, there is no need. So, but I am going to read a poem by Auden called Refugee Blues. Say this city has 10 million souls. Some are living in mansions, some are living in holes. Yet there's no place for us, my dear. Yet there's no place for us. Once we had a country, and we thought it fair. Look in the atlas, and you'll find it there. We cannot go there now, my dear. We cannot go there now. In the village churchyard, there grows an old yew. Every spring, it flowers anew. Old passports can't do that, my dear. Old passports can't do that. The consul banged the table and said, if you've got no passport, you're officially dead. But we are still alive, my dear. But we are still alive. Went to a committee, they offered me a chair, asked me politely to return next year. But where shall we go today, my dear? Where shall we go today? Came to a public meeting, the speaker stood up and said, if we let them in, they will steal our daily bread. He was talking of you and me, my dear. He was talking of you and me. Thought I heard the thunder rumbling in the sky. It was Hitler over Europe saying they must die. Oh, we were in his mind, my dear. Oh, we were in his mind. Saw a poodle wearing a jacket fastened with a pin. Saw a door open and a cat let in. But they weren't German Jews, my dear. But they weren't German Jews. went down to the harbor and stood upon the quay, saw the fish swimming as if they were free. Only 10 feet away, my dear, only 10 feet away. Walked into a wood, saw the birds and the trees. They had no politicians and sang at their ease. They weren't the human race, my dear. They weren't the human race. Dreamt I saw a building with 1,000 floors, 1,000 windows, and 1,000 doors. Not one of them was ours, my dear. Not one of them was ours. Ran down to the station to catch the express. Asked for 2 tickets to happiness, but every coach was full, my dear. But every coach was full. Stood on a great plain in the falling snow. 10,000 soldiers marched to and fro, looking for you and me, my dear, looking for you and me. Thank you.
The first poem I'm going to read is a poem by Dorothy Parker, and yes, it was written or published in 1927. It's a 5-part poem. I'll only read 3 parts. The overall title is Songs Not Encumbered by Reticence. Healed. Oh, when I threw my heart away, the year was at its fall. I saw my dear the other day beside a flowering wall, and this was all I had to say. I thought that he was tall. The second, superfluous advice. Should they whisper false of you, never troubled to deny, should the words they speak be true, weep and storm and swear they lie. And the last one, Swan Song. First you're hot, then you're cold, and the best you've got is the fact that you're old. Labor and hoard, worry and wed, and the biggest reward is to die in bed. A long time to sweat, a little time to shiver is all you will get. Where's the nearest river? The next poem is by Paul Tran, called The 3 Graces. The 3 Graces. Who could care about the probability of love when brought like us to this world under endless darkness? A great mountain engulfed by a greater ocean, we formed ever so slowly from tectonic plates colliding, one mounting another, riding the way time rode sunlight and moonlight across the icy surface of the water. We learned with time to view and invent this life from the depths where beasts, now extinct, bellowed and belted their brutal songs. All that remains of them and of that time are the bones we buried, burnished, beneath beds of sandstone and limestone, made unknown and then known when the waves and the darkness dried up. The wind whittled us like a restless sculptor pacing around a slab of marble, imitating God with a hammer and chisel. In the garden of the gods, we endured the erotics of erosion, loss, change. What we couldn't change and what we lost to time made us more fully ourselves and full of ourselves. We fooled around and made a fool of God. We, in our faulted and faultless glamour, became a brand new home for the bighorn sheep and lions, the canyon wrens and white-throated swifts swinging low below a cloudless sky. We drank the sky and threw up acres of wild prairie grass, pinyon juniper, and ponderosa pine from the remains of ancestral ranges and sand dunes. Maybe this was love. No, sorry, not over. Maybe this was love after all. We remained. We reinvented ourselves. We let the weaker parts of us go and decided, despite our egos and the tests of time, to test time and show how miraculous it is to exist, to live beyond survival, to be alive twice and thrice, and countless times to find one with and within another. What are the chances of that? 1 in 1,000, 1 in 1,000,000, 1 in love proves and is living proof that anything and everything is probable. Through seasons counting on rain to come down like a downpour of stars. Season of never this again. Seasons of this could last forever. And that is the end. And the last poem is by me, called The Landscape with the Fall of Icarus. How could I have failed you like this? The narrator asks the object. The object is a box of ashes. How could I not have saved you? A boy made of bone and blood, a boy made of a mind, of years, a hand and paint on canvas, a marble carving. How can I not reach where you are and pull you back? How can I be and you not? You're forever on the platform, seeing the pattern of the train door closing, then the silver streak of me leaving. What train was it? The number 6. What day was it? Wednesday. We had both admired the miniature mosaics stuck on the wall of the Met. That Karr should be forever sealed in amber. That dolorous day should be forever embedded in amber, in garnet, in amber, in opal, in order to keep going on. And how can it be that this means nothing to anyone but me now? Thank you.
I'm Deborah Garrison, and I have to say it has been the honor of my life to have worked with both Alice Quinn and Kevin Young. What marvelous editors, and to be also Kevin's editor is an honor. But we had such a great time making this book. He asked me, or he suggested that I read a poem I wrote called I Saw You Walking, which I wrote right after 9/11. But actually, now I'm going to have my editor's prerogative here. I think, especially because we heard How to Praise the Mutilated World, which also came out in the magazine right around that time, I'm going to pivot to a different September poem, and September poems are a great category unto themselves. But this poem, the reason is, Kevin, and I think Kevin will forgive me, because he talks in the introduction about what he calls refrigerator poems, which is the poem that you stumble on in the magazine, and even if it might be your favorite poet, but it might be a poet you've never even heard of or haven't thought about much, and you love that poem and you cut it out and it sort of becomes a fixture in your life. And this poem by Nina Cassian, a Romanian poet, called September, appeared in the magazine in the early days of my working there, I think in the late 80s, I want to say 1986 or 87, and I cut it out, and it was on my bulletin board at the New Yorker for the 15 years that I worked there, and I think even when I left, I took that tear sheet, I probably have it in my attic somewhere, but this is Nina Cassian, September, translated by Ruth Whitman. See, September is here. I used to address him when, much stronger than he, I would stretch out in the landscape with my sparkling skin like an enormous lizard, mistress of her piece of sand. Pale offspring, I would call him. Bachelor September, I would laugh, because I was always getting married, the eternal spouse of summer, my glorious bridegroom. See, September is here, the tender mouth of fall, once upon a time. His honey today is fermenting, no more silence. Bird folk clamor in the sky, cats full of kittens caterwaul. The donkey hee-haws, the sheep uproots the grass from the arid earth with a snap. Without my bridegroom, I no longer exist. And then the other poem I'll read is by Sharon Olds. Yes. Sharon couldn't be here with us tonight, but her story of her life in poetry and her poetry in the New Yorker, if you read it, is just a remarkable arc of a woman's life and of a remarkable life in poetry. And it's just such an honor to know her and work with her. And this is just one of the many, many great ones by Sharon Olds. It's called I Cannot Say I Did Not. I cannot say I did not ask to be born. I asked with my mother's beauty and her money. I asked with my father's desire for his orgasms and for my mother's money. I asked with the cradle my sister had grown out of. I asked with my mother's longing for a son. I asked with patriarchy. I asked with the milk that would well in her breasts, needing to be drained a little by a little living pump. I asked with my sister's hand-me-downs lying folded. I asked with geometry, with origami, with swimming, with sewing, with what my mind would thirst to learn. Before I existed, I asked with the love of my children to exist, and with the love of their children. Did I ask with my tiny flat lungs for a long portion of breaths? Did I ask with the space in the ground, like a portion of breath, where my body will rest when it is motionless, when its elements move back into the earth? I asked with everything I did not have to be born, and nowhere in any of it was there meaning. There was only the asking for being, and then the being, the turn taken. I want to say that love is the meaning, but I think that love may be the means, what we ask with. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I just hope I can see these words. Toy Derek Walcott, for my light skin. Toy, this is like so great to bring up Sharon. Toy is like the middle sister between Sharon and Lucille Clifton. For my light skin. I can only be forgiven by black people for the million times I walked down a street and no one knew I was there, as if I were tiptoeing, as if I took myself back from existence. For the hundreds of times my mother and I walked the galleries at Hudson's, not a dark soul to be found. The furniture behind red ropes untouchable. For all the places she and I kept eating our sandwiches. My mother liked minestrone soup on the 13th floor, where the white waitresses wore dull green dresses and caps. I always enjoyed a hot fudge sundae. Only black people can judge me. Only they know the anguish inserted in history when some ancestor of mine took the place of the one who went to the back. What was done made me. Only black people can know who I loved most, for whom I have done good. You can read 1,000,000 poems and you'll never find a poem that ends with that line. For whom I have done good. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Deb. I mean, it's such a, you could just teach this whole thing, right? You already got it tonight. Just in this little bit of time, you got a whole history, really, of the world's poetry. And I just was thinking like this switchblade poem when I came across it in that refrigerator kind of way. Hard to pick poems tonight, though. So I was like, I know this Michael Ryan eventually kind of went to become a fairly well-known memoirist, but why would you become a memoirist if you can do this? So it's just the idea of like a perfect little story, switchblade. Also, homework assignments, like start your poem. Most of the past is lost. That's the first line of your poem tonight. And then, for whom I have done good. Okay, switchblade, Michael Ryan. Most of the past is lost, and I'm glad Mine has vanished into blackness or space or whatever nowhere what we feel and do goes. But there were a few cool Sunday mornings when my father wasn't sick with hangover, and the air in the house wasn't foul with anger, and the best china had been cleared after the week's best meal, so he could place on the table his violins to polish with their special cloth and oil. 3 violins he'd arrange side by side in their velvet-lined cases with enough room for the lids to be open. They looked like children in coffins, 3 infant sisters whose heart had stopped for no reason. But after he'd rubbed their scrolls and waist along the lines of the grain to the highest sheen, they took on the knowing posture of women in silk gowns and magazine ads for big cars and ocean voyages. And as if a violin were a car in storage that needed to spin around the block every so often, for 15 minutes he would play each one. Though not until each horsehair bow was precisely tightened and coated with resin, and we had undergone an eon of tuning. When he played, no one was allowed to speak to him. He seemed to see something drastic across the room, or feel it through the handkerchief padding his chin board. So we'd hop in front of him, waving and making pig noises the way kids do to guards at Buckingham Palace. And after he'd finished playing and returned to himself, he'd softly curse the idiocy of his children, beneath my mother's voice yelling to him from the kitchen, "That was beautiful, Paul, play it again." He never did. And I always hoped he wouldn't, because the whole time I was waiting for his switchblade to appear. And the new stories he'd tell me, for the scar, thin as a seam, up the white underside of his forearm, for the chunks of proud flesh on his back and belly, scarlet souvenirs of East St. Louis dance halls in the 20s, cornered in men's bathrooms, ganged in blind alleys, always slashing out alone with his knife. For the first the violins had to be snug again inside their black cases, for who knew how many more months or years or lifetimes. Then he had to pretend to have forgotten why I was sitting there, wide-eyed across from him, long after my sister and brother had gone off with friends. Every time, as if an afterthought, he'd sneak into his pocket and ease the switchblade onto the bare table between us, its thumb button jutting from the pearl and silver plating like the eye of some sleek prehistoric fish. I must have known it wouldn't come to life and slither to me by itself, but when he'd finally nod to me to take it, his touch was still warm with his body heat, and I could feel the blade inside aching to flash open with the terrible click that sounds now like some tisk of disappointment. It has become so sweet and quiet. Just a really good story. Come on now. Okay. Punctuation. Something about the punctuation and space in this poem by Ilya Kaminsky. American, Ukrainian-American, dancing on Odessa. In a time of peace, Ilya Kaminsky. Inhabitant of Earth for 40-something years, I once found myself in a peaceful country. I watched neighbors open their phones to watch a cop demanding a man's driver's license. When a man reaches for his wallet, the cop shoots in the car window. Shoots. It is a peaceful country. We pocket our phones and go to the dentist, to pick up the kids from school, to buy shampoo and basil. Once, ours is a country in which a boy shot by police lies on the pavement for hours. We see his open mouth, the nakedness of the whole nation. We watch, others watch. The body of a boy lies on the pavement exactly like the body of a boy. It is a peaceful country. And it clips our citizens' bodies effortlessly, the way the president's wife trims her toenails. All of us still have to do the hard work of dentist appointments, of remembering to make a summer salad, basil, tomatoes. It is a joy, tomatoes. Add a little salt. This is a peaceful time. I do not hear gunshots, but watch birds splash over the backyards of the suburbs. How bright is the sky as the avenue springs on its axis. How bright the sky, forgive me. How bright. He's got that parenthetical, forgive me, if you know Elizabeth Bishop, wait. And ain't no punctuation. I got one more, so I'm like, also like no exclamation mark, no question mark. How bright the sky. Forgive me, how bright. Okay, so this is me. I'm going to be done. I'm Terrance. Did I say that? American sonnet for the new year. When I wrote this sonnet, I actually thought it was going to be the last one because I only write them, at certain times. A bunch of adverbs. American sonnet for the new year. Things got terribly ugly incredibly quickly. Things got ugly embarrassingly quickly, actually. Things got ugly unbelievably quickly, honestly. Things got ugly seemingly infrequently initially. Things got ugly ironically, usually awfully carefully. Things got ugly unsuccessfully, occasionally. Things got ugly mostly painstakingly, quietly, seemingly. Things got ugly beautifully, infrequently. Things got ugly sadly, especially frequently, unfortunately. Things got ugly increasingly obviously. Things got ugly suddenly, embarrassingly, forcefully. Things got really ugly regularly, truly quickly. Things got really incredibly ugly. Things will get less ugly, inevitably, hopefully.
What a great night, huh? Amazing. Now you can see why it was a real joy to do this anthology, to get to read all this poetry, to represent it to you, and to, in many cases, have picked it in the first place. It was such a treasure to come back. And, just hearing that last poem made me think about a lot of things, including some of the things that happened during my tenure, a pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, which Terrance's great poem about George Floyd appeared in the magazine. And one of the things that I realized is the pleasure of being able to take something in the magazine and run it the next week, the week after an event, and something that speaks to the moment. And what I love about poetry is the way that it is both timely and timeless. And this group of wonderful poets tonight really reminded us and remind me, I need reminding in some way about how much we need poetry, especially right now. I hope you agree. I know that for me, it's been a real honor to be here tonight with you and to be able to be the poetry editor of the New Yorker magazine and this wonderful anthology. I'm going to end with a poem that ends the book. It's a poem that I ran in 2020. It's by Ada Limon, the Poet Laureate of the United States, and it's called The End of Poetry. And if you remember those days, without touch, in a way, this poem, I think, speaks to that. The end of poetry. Enough of osseous and chickadee and sunflower and snowshoes, maple and seeds, samara and shoot, enough chiaroscuro, enough of thus and prophecy and the stoic farmer and faith and our Father and 'tis of thee, enough of bosom and bud, skin and God not forgetting, and star bodies and frozen birds, enough of the will to go on and not go on, or how a certain light does a certain thing. Enough of the kneeling and the rising and the looking inward and the looking up. Enough of the gun, the drama, and the acquaintance's suicide, the long-lost letter on the dresser. Enough of the longing and the ego and the obliteration of ego. Enough of the mother and the child and the father and the child, and enough of the pointing to the world, weary and desperate. Enough of the brutal and the border. Enough of, can you see me? Can you hear me? Enough, I am human. Enough, I am alone and I am desperate. Enough of the animal saving me. Enough of the high water. Enough sorrow. Enough of the air and its ease. I am asking you to touch me. Thank you very much. Happy birthday, New Yorker. Thank you. Come on out. Let's bring them out.